Get on your knees now." That's what the guy screamed at me in the middle of my own pasture finger, tight on the trigger, fake badge swinging on his chest. 3 more men fanned out behind him in tactical vests that said HOA enforcement, like we were in some discount action movie instead of rural Montana. And I remember thinking, if I screw this up, my tombstone is going to say I died because I refused to kneel for a homeowners association that doesn't even legally exist. What they didn't know, and what changed everything, was that I wasn't just some scruffy rancher fixing fence posts. I was a former Navy SEAL, and they had just committed felony assault on the wrong guy. Before we get to that part, let me back up. Because none of this started with guns. It started with a phone call about grass height and community standards. My name's Jake Thompson, 8 years in the Navy, 3 deployments, more desert and concrete than I ever wanted to see again. And when I got out, my grandma left me 200 acres outside a little town called Maplewood, Montana. A crooked fence line, a leaning barn, a German shepherd that liked me better than most people, and enough quiet that I could hear my own thoughts for the first time in years. That was the dream right there. Fix the place up. Drink coffee on the porch, let the mountains do their thing, and not have anybody telling me what color my mailbox had to be. No HOA, no board meetings, no busybodies with clipboards. That was kind of the point. One crisp morning in late September, I was out by the fence with a pair of work gloves and a stubborn fence post. Just me, Ranger the dog, and a sky big enough to swallow your problems when my phone buzzed with an unknown local number. I almost ignored it, but I picked up and heard this woman's voice, bright and polished, like a real estate ad. "Mr. Thompson, this is Linda Hayes with the Maplewood Ranch Community Association. I just wanted to welcome you to our community." I looked around at the empty fields and pine trees and thought, what community? But I kept that part to myself. "Didn't know we had a community association out here," I said. "Oh, we've been serving local property owners for several months now," she replied, that practiced sweetness never changing. "I'd love to stop by this afternoon with our handbook and talk about a few small items we need to bring into compliance." Compliance. That word always puts a knot in my neck. I told her 3 p.m. worked, hung up, and stood there in the grass, feeling that old prickle between my shoulder blades, the one that kept me alive in places where there were no second chances. Right at 3 p.m., like she'd synchronized her watch with my life. A white sedan crunched up my gravel drive, and out stepped Linda in a navy blazer, neat blonde bun heels that had never seen mud, carrying a leather folder and a smile that could cut glass. She shook my hand, called my property rustic in a way that sounded more like unacceptable, and handed me a binder heavy enough to use as a doorstop. "Our community handbook," she said. "Just some basic guidelines, paint colors, lawn height, exterior structures, things like that. A community is only as strong as its weakest link, Mr. Thompson." While she talked, her eyes were doing their own patrol. New gate security cameras. I'd mounted the old barn, the half-repaired fence, the tool shed that's been there since before I was born, like she was running reconnaissance. When she finally left, tires spitting dust, I sat on the porch and flipped through that binder, and the more I read, the less it sounded like neighbors helping neighbors, and the more it sounded like pay us or else. Max grass height of 2 inches fines for unapproved structures fees, for inspection services, threat of lien for non-payment, all wrapped in legal language thick enough to choke on. Then I got to the back cover and saw it. A little electronic device about the size of a coin taped inside like it was hiding. Not part of the binding, not anything any normal HOA would need. I'd seen enough improvised surveillance gear overseas to recognize the general idea, even if this was the Walmart version. I peeled it off, dropped it on the porch boards, and ground it under my boot until it crunched. Right then, I knew this wasn't about property values. This was about control, and somebody thought I was stupid enough not to notice. You know what I mean? That evening, I poured coffee, spread the binder and my phone on the table, and started doing what I used to do before missions: gather intel. By the time I was halfway through, my blood pressure was climbing. Every violation came with a fine. Every fine came with a compliance fee. Every fee could snowball into further enforcement action. No mention of real county authority, no signatures from actual officials. Just the Maplewood Ranch Community Association logo slapped on everything like a rubber stamp. Right on cue, my phone rang again. "Mr. Thompson," Linda chirped. "I trust you've reviewed our materials." I told her I had seen enough. "Wonderful," she said. "Someone will deliver your first compliance notice in the morning. Just a few small items. It's best if we resolve them quickly so they don't escalate." "What happens if I don't resolve them?" I asked. Her voice dipped just a hair. "We found that veterans sometimes struggle with civilian authority structures," she said. "I trust that won't be an issue here." Then she hung up. That line sat with me in a way I didn't like. I'd heard a lot of things about veterans since I got out. Broken, unstable, dangerous, pathetic. But struggle with authority structures said exactly what she meant. We think you're damaged enough to push around if we lean hard enough. Next morning at 7 a.m., sharp before the sun had burned the mist off the fields, a man in a pressed uniform that looked half security, half cosplay, knocked on my door. No smile, no small talk. Just handed me a certified envelope, took a picture of my porch with his phone, and walked back to an unmarked white pickup idling at the road. Inside the envelope was 3 pages of legalese and a bunch of high-resolution drone photos of my property, with little red circles and arrows, my grass exceeding maximum height, my fence non-compliant with approved pallet, my mailbox installed beyond allowable distance, my grandma's old shed labeled unauthorized structure. Total due $3,000 in fines and fees due that day. $50 per day. Late appeal only in person at an office 2 hours away. Business hours only. I called the number on the letterhead and got a receptionist who sounded like she'd been trained to be as unhelpful as possible. "All disputes must be handled in person at our office in Billings," she said. "Please bring payment in full or a signed compliance agreement. Late fees begin at midnight." "And if I can't make it today?" I asked. "Then I strongly suggest you clear your schedule," she replied. And that was that. I set the phone down and looked out the window. That same white pickup was parked just outside my fence line. 2 men inside one of them, holding binoculars. They weren't pretending to be neighbors anymore. They were on a stakeout. Old habits kicked in, and I snapped photos of the truck zooming in on the plate and their faces. I sent them to an old contact who owed me a favor. Couple hours later, he texted back, plate registered to a shell company out of Delaware with no real address. One face tied to an ex-security contractor discharged for conduct issues, the other with an assault record. Definitely not the bake sale committee. That night, as the sun went down and rangers stretched out at my feet, another pair of headlights crept down the county road, slowed in front of my place, then kept going. My cameras caught it all. My gut told me it wasn't neighbors getting lost. It was surveillance. You know when something is just off, and this was off. Next evening, a black SUV rolled right up the driveway. Two guys climbed out in tactical pants, boots, ball caps embroidered with HOA security in gold. "Evening, Mr. Thompson," the taller one said, flashing a laminated badge that looked official enough if you didn't stare too hard. "Mark Stevens, Maplewood Ranch Security. We're here to conduct a safety inspection of your property." I wiped my hands on my jeans and asked the only question that mattered. "You got a warrant?" He smiled like I was being silly. "This is a voluntary compliance check under community guidelines," he said. "We've had reports of potential hazards that could impact neighboring properties, structural issues, environmental concerns, unauthorized modifications. We're just here to keep everyone safe." I gestured out at 200 acres of empty fields. "What neighbors?" I asked. The shorter guy shifted hand resting near his hip, like he wanted me to see what was under his jacket. Mark kept his act going. "We can make this easy, or we can note your refusal to cooperate," he said. I let them walk the fence line and exterior. No inside buildings, no barns, no sheds, and watched where they paid attention. They didn't care about loose boards or old wiring. They cared about camera angles, blind spots, distance from road to the back door. The one rear entrance my cameras couldn't see. Recon, not safety. When they left, Mark smiled thin. "We'll be back for a follow-up," he said. "Mrs. Hayes wants to ensure full compliance." Later that night, my phone rang again, but it wasn't Linda this time. "Mr. Thompson, this is Deputy Sheriff Coleman," a tired voice said. "I understand you've had some visitors from a so-called association." I told him the whole story. The handbook, the bug in the binder, the drone photos, the fake inspection. He let out a breath and said, "You're not the first. We've had similar complaints in the next county over. Fake HOAs, threats, fines, then people selling under pressure. Mostly older folks and veterans living alone." I asked him what happened when people refused to pay. He was quiet for a second. "Things escalate," he said. "Tractors get sabotaged, gates get left open, livestock go missing, sometimes worse. Nothing that sticks in court, but enough to scare people. Most just sign and move on. The ones who don't have a rough time." That was the moment the switch flipped for me. Up until then, I'd been annoyed, then creeped out, then angry. But it was still about me and my ranch. Hearing that they were deliberately targeting people like my grandma, like some of the guys I served with folks who couldn't or wouldn't fight back, turned it into something else. This wasn't just my fence. This was a line I couldn't let them cross. Over the next couple days, the white pickup kept cruising by on a schedule, like they were clocking in and out. And I dug deeper. The Maplewood Ranch Community Association turned out to be 4 months old. No actual office, just a PBO box and some paperwork filed by a law firm known for creating shell companies. The association had no legal authority over my land, no recorded covenants, no proper vote, nothing. It was all smoke and letterhead. The more I looked, the more one name kept bubbling up behind the scenes. A developer out of Billings named Rebecca Harrison. Big into rural luxury projects. Big into political donations. Very big into getting what she wanted. Which brings us back to that morning in the pasture, me with a fence post. 4 of her hired guns with sidearms and fake badges telling me to kneel. When I didn't, when I asked to see a real warrant. That's when Mark drew on me, and Tony, his jumpy partner, followed suit. They thought I was frozen. In reality, my brain was doing exactly what it had been trained to do for years. Count numbers angles, distances, cover threats timing. I gave them that 3-second warning more for me than for them. 3, 2, 1. Then I dropped behind the tractor as the first shots cracked wide, scrambled on muscle memory, and did what I had to do to make sure I walked away. I'm not going to give you a frame by frame, but I'll tell you this. It took less than 30 seconds to go from get on your knees to Mark face down in the dirt with his own zip ties on his wrists. Tony's gun kicked out of reach, the other two standing by their trucks with their hands in the air, suddenly very motivated to reconsider their life choices. "Who the hell are you?" Mark demanded, breathing hard. I picked up his HOA enforcement badge, turned it between my fingers. "Just a rancher who doesn't like guns pointed at him," I said, "and a guy your boss really should have looked up before she sent you here." I yanked the body cam off his vest, saw that it had been recording the whole time, and smiled for the first time in 2 days. Then I called Coleman. 20 minutes later, he pulled up, took one look at 4 grown men zip-tied in my yard, and a neat pile of confiscated weapons, and let out a low whistle. "You want to tell me what happened here, Jake?" he asked. We played back the body cam footage on his tailgate. Clear as day, Mark announcing a fake arrest, brandishing a weapon, me asking for proper ID, the shots, the takedown. Coleman didn't even try to hide his reaction. "Assault with a deadly weapon, attempted kidnapping, impersonating law enforcement," he muttered, shaking his head. These boys are going to have a bad time. Under that kind of pressure, Mark and Tony folded faster than wet cardboard. "We're just contractors," Tony blurted. "Some lady in Billings, Harrison. She pays cash through this HOA president, Linda. We were supposed to scare you, make you think you had no rights, make you want to sell. We didn't know you were military, man. Nobody told us that." Coleman and I locked eyes, and we both knew. This wasn't just a little local scam, this was organized. He dug into his files. I shared what I'd found, and pretty soon a pattern popped up. Same kind of fake association in other counties, same type of armed inspectors, same pressure tactics, and in the center of the web, that same developers network. "I'm calling the feds," Coleman said finally. "This crosses counties, maybe states, probably money laundering too. We're out of our depth." That's how I ended up sitting in my kitchen later that night, with Special Agent Miller from the FBI, a cup of terrible gas station coffee in his hand, and a stack of documents in front of him. "We've had our eye on Rebecca Harrison for a while," he said. "Shell companies, suspicious land deals, political donations that line up a little too neatly with zoning changes. What we didn't have was somebody willing to push back, and a clean recorded case of her contractors pulling guns on a property owner. Until today. They asked if I'd be willing to help them nail her down. Wear a wire, meet her in person, let her talk. I thought about it for maybe 10 seconds. "If it shuts this down so she can't do it to anyone else," I said, "I'm in." So the next day, I drove to this little truck stop diner off Highway 2, the kind of place with faded posters on the walls and pie that's always almost fresh, and sat in a booth where I could see the whole parking lot. Miller and his team were outside in an unmarked van. Coleman's deputies were scattered in regular cars, and I had a wire taped under my shirt and a cup of coffee going cold in front of me. Rebecca Harrison walked in right on time, mid-40s gray suit. The kind of confidence you only get when you've gotten away with too much for too long. She slid into the booth across from me like we were old friends. "Mr. Thompson? Thank you for agreeing to meet," she said, laying a leather portfolio on the table. "I believe we can still reach an agreement that benefits everyone." She pulled out a cashier's check and set it between us. $400,000, my name printed neatly on the line. "This is well above distressed sale value for your property," she said. "Given the unfortunate misunderstandings with our contractors, I'm prepared to be generous." I didn't touch it. Why my ranch? I asked. Out of all the land in Montana, why are you so interested in a beat-up place with a crooked fence? She smiled with just her mouth. Because your land sits on prime development territory, she said. Water rights, mineral access, view proximity to a planned highway expansion. It's perfect for a luxury retreat. And because my investors don't like delays. Then she laid out the threat, real calm, like she was discussing the weather. If I didn't sell, there could be tax audits, environmental reviews permitting delays, trouble with utilities, nothing she'd personally control, of course just the way things tend to go when someone chooses to be difficult. I prefer to work things out quietly, she said, stirring her coffee. I let a beat pass, then looked her right in the eye. You know, you probably could have just made a fair offer and still come out ahead, I said. Instead, you created a fake association, sent people to threaten old ranchers and veterans, and put guns on my property. For someone so smart, that seems pretty stupid. For the first time, her mask slipped just a little. You're oversimplifying, she said. I identify opportunities and pursue them aggressively. Some people need a little extra motivation to do what's best for everyone. I leaned in, slightly lowered my voice. Red Valley, Maplewood, Jefferson County. That's not a few people, that's a pattern, I said. Shell companies in Delaware, post office box, HOAs, contractors with assault records. And now a check you think will make me forget. You tried to have me bullied into selling. You know what, Victoria? I don't think you're nearly as untouchable as you believe. She went cold. This conversation is over, she snapped, gathering her papers. She started toward the door, phone in hand, texting with the kind of speed that says, the next phase of the plan is already in motion. Out in the lot, a black SUV I'd noticed earlier suddenly looked a lot more important. 3 men stepped out, scanning positioning. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. 60 seconds to accept the offer, or things get complicated. I hit call instead. She picked up on the first ring, still walking. Last chance, Mr. Thompson, she said. Take the deal, or I can't guarantee how messy this gets for you. I watched as the diner door swung open, and FBI agents in tactical gear moved fast toward that SUV. Guns low, but ready. Here's the thing, Rebecca, I said, keeping my voice easy, almost conversational. This whole time you thought you were hunting some broken-down vet alone on his grandma's ranch. What you didn't realize is the FBI has been listening to every word you've said, and they're outside right now. So if anyone's about to have a messy day, it's not me. She turned in the doorway just in time to see the agents closing in. Miller's voice ringing out, Rebecca Harrison, FBI, keep your hands where we can see them. And in that split second, the look on her face said it all. Shock, fury, and that sinking, yeah, that happened, realization that the game was over. They took her into custody along with her hired muscle, and within days they were raiding offices, seizing files, and calling other counties with updates. Turned out my case was just one piece of a bigger puzzle. Dozens of properties across 4 states, many owned by elderly folks or veterans, pressured into selling cheap through fear and fake authority. 6 months later, I stood in a federal courtroom and watched Rebecca Harrison get sentenced. 15 years in prison, assets seized, barred for life from real estate development. Her husband, a city councilman who'd been greasing the wheels, got his own chunk of time. County commissioners who took her money were led away in cuffs. On paper, it was justice. In her orange jumpsuit, she looked nothing like the woman who'd walked into that diner thinking she owned the world. On the courthouse steps, Agent Miller clapped me on the shoulder and said, "Your refusal to bend is why we got her this fast. Most folks never make it this far." I went home after that, back to my fence posts, and the quiet and ranger snoring on the porch, and it finally felt like my land again. No white pickups slowly rolling by, no strangers with clipboards, no late-night patrols. But the story didn't just end with her going to prison. Other ranchers started calling me, some just wanting to say thanks, others asking how to push back when someone with a title and a form letter tried to scare them. Veterans came by, sat at my kitchen table, and talked about the way people treated them like they were broken and easy to manipulate. My place slowly turned into this unofficial spot where folks compared stories and reminded each other they weren't crazy for wanting to stand their ground. So that's the story. I went from just wanting to fix a fence in peace to being the guy who helped take down a fake HOA empire just because I refused to get on my knees for somebody waving a gun and a bogus badge. But here's what I really want to know. And this is where you come in. Where do you draw the line between keeping the peace and letting people walk all over you because they sound official? Do you think I went too far not complying that morning? Or do you think more people need to say, "Show me the law," instead of "Yes, sir," when something feels wrong? Have you ever dealt with an HOA, a boss, a cop? Anyone who used their position to bully you or your family? And how did you handle it? I want you to tell me in the comments. Was I right? Was I reckless? What would you have done if 4 armed enforcers rolled up on your property and told you to kneel? Share your take, your own stories, your horror HOA moments, or any time fake authority tried to push you around because somebody scrolling through might need to know they're not the only one who's been there. And if you think nobody should have to kneel on their own land for a scam, hit subscribe and send this to the one friend you know who absolutely hates bullies.